We are live. So, welcome back to another episode of the Playbook. As you can probably see, you're just looking at my face. If you're watching on YouTube, you're just listening to my voice. If you're listening on Spotify, we are officially down a man. Liam Kieran is no longer in Dubai, and unfortunately, there will be a few episodes of a solo podcast to begin with, and then over the next coming weeks, I hope to start really interviewing some people who pique my interest. So to give a bit of context in terms of where I see this going is I'm trying to stay true, stay aligned with the original reason as to why I started the podcast. For anybody who's been listening since last August, the initial reason that I started the Playbook was in order to help people understand what it takes to be a real estate agent in Dubai. And then obviously as the months progressed, I kept adding more and more content, and then Liam came over. And then Liam joined me and we just rebranded the Playbook. We kind of took our own direction, just spoke to people that piqued our natural curiosity, and then just obviously spoke to each other, which was thoroughly enjoyable. The direction of the podcast from now on will be still podcast weekly on Spotify, on YouTube. There will be solo podcasts, some episodes, and then some episodes I hope to interview some interesting people. But aligning with the reason as to why I started the podcast is extremely important for me. I am going to try and make high performance accessible to anybody in any given industry. I thoroughly believe that unlocking a new level of high performance is really easily achievable for a lot of people without people necessarily knowing it. And I want to be able to help people who are struggling in a current situation, who are feeling a bit lost, hopeless, a feeling of directionless, and they feel like they aren't really living up to their truest potential. Some insights to some things that I've learned along the way in order for you to be able to achieve those same things that I did. So to give a bit of context, obviously everybody who's listening to the podcast already understands who I am, what I'm currently doing, and what has brought me here. But for me, I think growing up, I wasn't necessarily good at anything specific. And for me, that felt like that there was nothing really out there for me. It made me feel like I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in life, and there was no clear path forward for me. As a result, I didn't really feel like that I had what it took to be successful. I felt that a lot of the things that people talk about in terms of high performance was a lot to do with natural ability and genetics, when that actually isn't the case whatsoever. And then moving into a performance-based role like real estate, you really do get the opportunity to completely test who you are, test your own theories, and really push the limits of what you're actually capable of. And I genuinely think that this is the same within any given industry, especially in sales roles that are performance-based roles. You know, you can go in and you can work the same amount as somebody, but then somebody gets paid 10 times more. It's like, okay, why is that the reason? And how do I maneuver myself to be in the best position and able to unlock that high performance? Now, this isn't just going to be high performance within the real estate world. It's going to be high performance within work, high performance outside of work. It's going to be some of the things that I have learned about the obstacles that I put in my way. This is from limiting beliefs to the stories that I told myself to the things that I was afraid of doing and not fully understanding who I was. And I want to make this accessible to everybody so everybody can understand what it takes to be successful. And when I put air quotations like that, it's your definitions of successful. Like, two people have completely different definitions of successful, but I'm trying to help people unlock a new lever and push themselves into that high performance, because I think it's extremely accessible for a lot of people. So that's the kind of future direction for the podcast. And over the next coming weeks, I'm really going to delve into that. In the next coming months, I'm really going to delve into that. And this is for you to be able to unlock that kind of peak performance in any given industry whatsoever. So where does that leave us now at the moment? So this week, I'm just going to kind of give a bit of insight to that. So I hope I've made it clear to everybody the future direction for the podcast, and I hope that some people will still find value from it. And each week I'm just kind of explore a topic that would be of interest to me and hopefully of interest to other people. Obviously, speaking to a camera, speaking like this is something that is quite alien to me. Obviously, when I was doing the solo podcast, there was no camera on me, so it wasn't as intimidating. But I mean, if you're not leaning into something that is uncomfortable for you, then you're not necessarily growing. But this week, I just want to explore my last 3 weeks and some of the lessons that I've learned from taking myself from what was a comfortable situation that many people would have assumed that I would have stayed in that company for years and years to come, to completely starting brand new, to an extent, in a brand new company where nobody knew me, and go into a different role. So at the moment, as I explained last week, I am a leasing manager with a new company. And as I said last week, if you're listening to the episode, that first week for me felt like my first week in real estate. It felt like, okay, nobody knows me again. I've got a clear point to prove. I've got a clear name to make for myself. Obviously, people were familiar with they knew that in order for me to get that title, that I would have had to have sufficient proof in order to get it. So there definitely was some sort of expectations, and that was unfamiliar for me. But again, it was a completely unfamiliar situation. It's the first time that I've had to manage people, and I had a lot of preconceived ideas about my capabilities, and I wasn't fully sure about if I was going to be capable for the job, and a lot of self-doubt. So over the last few weeks, I've genuinely just been trying to find my feet, and it's gotten to a stage where I finally found my feet, and I'm trying to explore different ideas to take me and take the team to the next level over the next coming months. And the way that I view it at the moment, being a manager, there's not necessarily a lot you have to do on a day-to-day basis. Like, I'm getting caught in moments of where I'm not fully sure what to do next. So I'm still trying to find the points of most leverage within a managerial job. But I genuinely believe that there's actually not that much to do as a manager. Maybe you've got a lot of people that you're working, like a lot of people that you're managing. Maybe you've got a lot of things to take on, but on a day-to-day basis, like that 9-hour workday there's actually not much to do there. So I can get as much done throughout focus periods of work blocks, and then I've got a lot of free time to delve into the next coming months and what I really want to do. So after my first week, I'm going to try and teach some lessons that I wish I learned. I wish I knew before going into a managerial role or a leadership role for the first time. I had no leadership or managerial experience. So I'm going to try and speak to my previous self of 4 weeks ago and tell him some of the lessons that I've learned up to this point already. So I was doing my background research. I was kind of exploring the first 90 days, which is a leadership book in terms of how to orientate myself for success for the first 90 days, build out a plan, speak to people. So I followed those guidelines, kind of the bones of that structure pretty well. But a lot of it is instinctual. A lot of it is learn on your feet. You have to rely on who you are innately in order to perform. And I had to do that. The first week was definitely fighting fire. I was in reactive mode for the whole entire week. And you need to know, if you're going into a new role as a manager, that first week is always going to be like that. Don't expect to have any system set up. Expect to make any big changes. Don't expect to go in all guns blazing, telling people how they should do things and why we should change. I think in that company, there has been a lot of people moving in and out of the company, a lot of people coming in, telling everybody that they've got brand new ideas that they want to input on everybody else. They stay there for like a few months and then just leave. So the people in that company are well used of new managers coming in, implementing change, completely flipping us on its head, and then in a few months' time, leaving. So a lot of the agents had a lot of trust issues. And you need to understand that the first week within any leadership or managerial role, it will be just exploration. What you're trying to do is get a finger on the pulse. You need to understand who to speak to, what to ask. And that whole week is trying to get as many different opinions about the current state of the company, as many different opinions about who people are, and actually understand people on a human to human basis. So what it looked like for me was first speaking to head of HR. He was preparing me, kind of mentioned the people on my team, what to expect, a bit of background behind them, and how I should orientate myself. Then I spoke to the managing director or head of residential, and he was kind of doing the same because he was new as well. He was trying to give me some insight on some of the things that he learned over the previous 3 weeks. So he'd only been there for 3 weeks by the time I got my foot in the door, which was nice because he didn't have any system set in stone. Like he's very open to new ideas, very open to change, very open to outside opinions, and he hasn't been in the company for, years and years and years and years, and is very resistant to change, resistant to new ideas, very fluid in terms of new ideas and flexibility. So speaking with him was just understanding that more. He gave me some insight of what to expect, the people who I was going to speak to and the people that were going to be on my team. I definitely was on the back foot to begin with. So all the agents in there were leasing and sales agents. If you're in the real estate domain, you'll understand when agents get the flexibility to do leasing and sales, they can obviously sell properties and rent properties. And a group of agents were told that now they specifically only could do leasing. And then an hour later, I arrived and I was the one who was going to be the new manager. So you can imagine the kind of situation that I was facing in terms of I was clearly the bad guy. I was clearly the person who inflicted and motivated that change for people. So I was public enemy number one. And I understood that. So for me, it was just removing all the titles, removing any sort of my ideas and not forcing them upon them. And then after I spoke with the head of residential, then speaking to the agents one by one. And this was just to understand them as a person. It wasn't me inflicting on them my ideas or me pushing my agenda or telling them when to come in, when to leave, and what kind of key performance indicators that I expect. It was none of that. That was to follow, obviously. But that first initial conversation was just a probe into who they are as a person, what challenges they're facing, and essentially it was just a chit chat. And the way that I orientated those conversations was, first I asked them about how they experienced the change. Obviously, I came from a place of empathy and really led with, look, I really understand how difficult it must be. If I was in your situation, I would be quite frustrated. And that initial kind of sentence really definitely took the heat out of the situation, and they understood that I wasn't going to be the person who was going to be really kind of pressing down on them in terms of change. I was going to be a person who understood what they were going through to an extent, and I could put myself in their shoes, and I wasn't going to demand of them certain things. I just wanted to help them get to where they wanted to go. So that was the initial conversations with the people on my team. And again, it was just familiarizing myself with the people. Towards the end of the week, I kind of built out one-to-one roadmaps with each individual person on the team, which I will get to in a moment. But after those initial conversations, again, it was just speaking to some of the other line managers, some of the other team leaders, having a brief conversation again and recap with the head of residential, and then speaking with the CEO. So then I sat down with each of the agents on my team and built out a roadmap. And this was a roadmap that was inspired to me by Kaizen, by Mark and Paddy, who did this roadmap for me to understand what was I aiming towards, what were the things that were motivating me, the things that I was running away from and running towards, and what was the overall habits that I needed to put in place in order to get to where I wanted to go. So I sat down on I think it could have been the third day, and I had that idea. I was like, okay, I could technically build out a roadmap for each of these people and treat them like my clients on a one-to-one basis. And I've got the full flexibility to do that. I mean, one of the big things that the head of residential said to me, he said that you can make this your own, Brian. He was like, it's completely up to you what you want to do with this, and we're giving you the flexibility to do what you like. To an extent, obviously. Obviously to an extent. But they're giving me a lot of freedom, and they're giving me a lot of ability to make it my own, which I really do appreciate, because if I went into a company and they're like, okay, now you just sit down, now you stand up, and this is your team, and you do exactly as we said, because this is what has been done for years, I would feel quite constrained. I'd feel like I was put in a box, and I would just feel like another fucking employee, which isn't necessarily my style. So getting back to the roadmap, like I sat each of them down, and the way that the roadmap looks is, okay, this is going to be a 12-week block. I explained to them and said, okay, what are your main goals? What are your sub goals? Not the goals and the goals that you think should be set for you. No key performance indicators or targets based off how much you should make if you're an agent within this company. No, what are your actual goals? Personal goals. What are your main goals over the next 12 weeks? And what are your sub goals? Examples were how many deals closed. Other examples were how much commission was earned. All of those kind of scene metrics. Other unobservable goals was make a name for myself, build my confidence. And that kind of struck a chord with me, because there was a few reoccurring themes within that about building confidence and stuff like that, which I'm going to get to in the later episodes. But after we kind of defined their goals, we defined what it is that they were running away from and what were they running towards. This is an idea that I've spoke about a lot. Within motivation, there are things that will drive you to get you to where you need to be, but also things that will pull you along the way. So if I've got a massive overarching goal of, let's say, take the marathon, for example. Obviously, the marathon was the thing that was pulling me towards it. The idea of going to Prague with my brothers and doing a marathon, that was something that was pulling me towards it. My fuel would have been proving myself wrong, would have been not letting people down, would have been running away from who I used to identify myself as. And sometimes the things that you're running away from, that motivating fuel that's going to push you further away from your current state, actually can be a lot more motivating than the thing that you're running towards. So I mapped out with them exactly the things that they're running away from and what they're running towards. And we got clear with that. And then we kind of defined what the next 12 weeks would look like in terms of the habits that we would put in place. So we spoke about the first 2 weeks, the fact that it would be a build phase. So all we're trying to really get clear on would be the kind of habits that we have to put in place in the first 2 weeks. And the kind of habits we put in the first 2 weeks in order to orientate ourselves towards this big overarching goal. And then the next 6 weeks, we were really going to double down on those goals in the first, or those habits on the first 2 weeks, and really start kind of working on them further. And then the last 4 weeks would have just been perfecting those things and kind of cleaning up any areas that need to be cleaned up. And then after the 12-week periods, they would be on track or already have hit some of the goals that they've set themselves. And then after kind of defining those habits, what we did was go through some of the obstacles that they would face in the first coming weeks. And this wouldn't be obstacles from the external environment. This is what I tried to make clear. these wouldn't be the obstacles that you might face externally, like, or there might be some more changes within the company. There might be a flood again. My car might break down. All those things are obstacles that you could potentially face, yes, but they're obstacles that you do not have any control in whatsoever. So the obstacles that I was getting them to define were the self-inflicted obstacles. What are some of the things that you've done to self-sabotage yourself in the past and prevent you from getting from to where you need to be? And what are those goals that could potentially come up? So for me, it could be my procrastination. It could be my self-doubt. It could be my negative self-talk. It could be burning the candles at both ends and working to an extent that I'm actually getting less out than I'm putting in. So that's an example of some of the obstacles that I put in front of me unnecessarily. So I was giving them the opportunity to kind of define some of those obstacles that they potentially could face. And after that, I think there was a lot of clarity in terms of where they wanted to go, who they were as a person, and what they actually wanted, and what were the things that they were going to have to put in place in order to get to where they needed to be. And then on a week-to-week basis, I'm checking in with them, kind of reflecting on how the previous week was and what's the plans in place for this coming week. Now, this whole idea was something that I completely created myself. So if it's going to work, I do not know whatsoever. But I think once you make the unconscious conscious, you start directing yourself and being conscious of the actions and conscious of the week and conscious of the things that motivate you and conscious about the obstacles that you could put in front of yourself. So I think if that's the only outcome, then I think it's done its job. But again, we don't really know. We don't really know. I mean, I don't really know whatsoever. So we'll see how that goes. And that was kind of the first week in a nutshell, just finding out all the information I needed to know, mapping out the 12-week roadmap with each of the people on my team, and then finding out what I could do for them and how I could help, and specifically targeting that. Like, if there's any concerns, if there's any things that need to be done, I execute it really, really quickly, because they were in a position where people said a lot of things that they were going to do, a lot of things that they would change, and then nothing was done. I've learned that as an agent within a company, you get a lot of new ideas coming in. You get a lot of managers or whatever saying that they're going to do X, Y, and Z, and none of it is implemented. And that is frustrating, because you start not trusting what people say. And I used to take people at their word, but now I don't take people at their word until I see some clear action. So I'm trying to be the opposite of that. I'm trying to show that if I say something, I'll do it, and be clear with them on that. And I'm trying to make them understand that I'm genuinely just there to help them, and I'm showing them that they could be in a better position than some of the people who weren't moved into that team, because they get one-to-one coaching, one-to-one mentoring, and they could really excel and bypass all the people who weren't put into this quote-unquote downgrade of a team. So then over the next 2 weeks after that, it was really more exploration, more understanding what the systems are in the company, what are the current kind of feelings about the company, people's ideas of the future direction, and how things have worked in the past, and what has happened when things went well. Like, what are some of the things that people were doing when things went well, and what were some of the things that people were doing when things went badly. And again, it's just a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, a lot of interviews, which is draining, and definitely took it out of me. And yeah. And then it was just kind of more exploration for the second week. And it kind of still was this week, just even getting a lot of opinions about different things, in terms of how kind of long things can take, and people's different opinions on stuff. But it's definitely at the same time implementing some small changes. So I'm really working on leveling up each of the agents, teaching them a lot of things that I know, uploading like training plans and coursework, and a lot of the stuff that you wouldn't be taught in training on a one-to-one basis, and obviously being there for them for support, helping them have those conversations that are difficult in terms of with their clients, and it's just being there for them whenever they need. And then towards the tail end of this week, I definitely had a feeling of, okay, now I'm clear on the bones of the job. Now I'm clear about what's currently going on. And I had conversations about where we need to go. But again, it just feels like that I've got a lot of spare time within that bracket of a 9-hour day. I mean, it's not going to take me a lot of time to do my check-ins. It's not going to take me a lot of time to manage the Salesforce CRM and take a look at the listing portals and be there for the agents. So I do have a lot of flexibility in terms of time. So I'm trying to find out the key kind of points of leverage and how can I make change, but not too much change that if there could be resistance there. So I'm really exploring what it is. So I'm going to try and document my journey along the way. And over these next few months, I'm really excited for this opportunity within work, because it gives me the opportunity to kind of document the whole journey about what it takes to build a real estate team, what it takes to lead people and manage people, and some of the common concerns that I hear, and some of the issues that people face, and some of the things that people are putting in front of themselves in terms of obstacles, and being able to share a lot of the lessons learned, being able to kind of zone in on some specific topics and then speak to people outside of that. So it's taken me completely out of my comfort zone of being an agent and more into the managerial side, but I technically can still do my own deals. But again, it kind of takes me away from the reason that I was there. So it's brought a fresh challenge for me. It's brought a lot of me thinking and trying to think outside the box, obviously learning the rules of the game before I tried to break them. But yeah, a lot of thinking outside the box, and it's ignited this new passion within me for real estate, because I got on here a few weeks ago saying I'm not sure if real estate is for me anymore. But I think it was just specifically that role and the company at the time. And this is nothing bad against the company. Again, we left on really good terms. But it's just, I think I'm so afraid of becoming complacent and becoming comfortable that any indication of that, I try and remove myself from the situation, because it didn't feel like I was learning anymore. And if you're not learning in a room, then you're teaching to everybody else. And I don't think I have learned enough yet to be able to be okay. Now is my time to teach. So I'm trying to learn as much as I can from people and from new experiences, and taking myself out of my comfort zone. And it's only the hindsight that makes me see that I was in an area or a time of comfort without really realizing it. So if you are in a time of comfort, if you feel like, everything is just the same all day, you're not really driven and passionate about starting your job, potentially you could have been in a position that I was. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of some of the updates in terms of the podcast, the future direction, and what I've learned over the last few weeks, and where I hope to take this. So again, a massive thank you to anybody who's been listening through this big transition from August, from the Dubai Real Estate Playbook to the Playbook with Liam, and then now the Playbook with myself. So I'm really, really excited for what's to come. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button or follow on Spotify. And if you're around on a Saturday morning and you're thinking of meeting new people, make sure to come down to the Saturday Run Club. I really, really would like to see you there if you haven't made your face already. So yeah, thank you, and we will see you in the next one.